Great. Lakshman, thank you so much for making the time, to be here with me to sort of travel down memory lane, so to say, to sort of recollect and remember and record, reminiscences about your times with my dad, Dr. TK. But before we jump into the reminiscences, I want the future audiences of this video to know who you are. So maybe you can introduce yourself, tell us your story a little bit, and tell us what you're doing now, and it'd be great to record that.
I am Lakshman Rao. I am in the Department of Applied Mechanics and Biomedical Engineering at IIT Madras. I'm a senior professor. I'm due to retire in another 2 years. So I've been here in IIT for quite some time. I did my BTech at IIT Madras in civil engineering and also did a master's there. Then I came to MIT to complete my PhD. Then there was a gap for about 11 months, and then I joined back as a faculty in various categories, and then now I'm a professor in this department. I generally work in some aspects of mechanics, impact mechanics, modeling of materials, and numerical modeling, and so on. I take interest in many new developments that need to be addressed by people of my background. So from that perspective, I have also explored in some of the use of mechanics in many of the traditional medical practices like Shirodhara and so on. That's one of my current interests. With regard to rural development, it has been just a passion which was taken from books. I grew up as an urban lad, but have been reading a lot, especially of Gandhi, etc. And so that's somewhere deep down in my corner, I think I had an appreciation of maybe living in a isolated farmland and so on, and that's what attracted me to rural India. So that's my background.
Understood. This is quite interesting. Do you feel like this interest in rural development came when you were a BTech student, or when you were doing a PhD? Where did it start?
See, we had 11 years of schooling at that time. I studied in the same campus. And somewhere during the 8th or 9th standard itself, for some reasons, maybe because I read the abstract of Experiments of Truth by M.K. Gandhi, I somehow got attracted to Mohanlal Karamchand Gandhi, and kept on reading many more things, and some of the things somehow stuck to my head very dogmatically. At that age, something picks up your mind and you think that that's the greatest thing. So somewhere around the 11th standard, when I was talking, when I was knowing about IIT, we didn't know too much about IIT. Something is going on in IIT. We live in the campus, but we don't know what great things are going on. But there was an advertisement in the newspaper that IIT is participating in rural development, and Center for Rural Development was there and so on, and they made a big noise. And therefore, my dream in IIT was not to do anything else, but maybe this is a good thing that we should do. And that aligned with my reading of M.K. Gandhi. And that's about all that I knew. So it's primarily because of my reading of M.K. Gandhi is that I was attracted to rural development. Some of the important things that he would say that, there's a 80% of the population are contributing to the growth of 20% of the urban development, and therefore, if you want to have an overall growth, everybody, a poor man on the street should be catered to, and so, and also with regard to food, etc. We used to see that everything that you overeat is by starving somebody on the street. Some of these things somehow stuck into my head. Even when I was in 10th standard, I used to do experiments on myself to define what is overeating. And so that means, so I kept on reducing my food intake. I became very lean. I used to be very fat, and then I became very lean. People in my home used to get worried what I'm doing. And then slowly, I mean, somehow I came out of it. But the point is that at that age, reading some books like that do have a lot of influence. And sometimes when you don't have a guidance of what it's or how to take it in that perspective, you may think that everybody else is doing the wrong thing and you are the only one doing the right thing.
I'm familiar with that feeling, but I'm really curious now. Like, what is this experiment like? Was it like a series of fasts that you undertook when you were in school?
Exactly. Reduce the amount of intake. Basically, don't take that much and take minimum. See how much you can survive without with minimum that you intake. So
Understood. Was it like
so that
smaller meals
experiment,
each time, or like you just skipped
exactly.
meals?
Yeah. Not skipping, but maybe taking very little of
Understood.
what. So those are the things experiments I was doing
Understood.
at home. Much to the surprise of my parents, and they were getting worried what I
I
was
can
doing.
imagine. I can imagine your mom fussing all over you about Lakshman is wasting away. And,
So I think my fascination for rural development was primarily from readings of M.K. Gandhi.
mhm,
I would not say that I am in the same fascination today,
mhm.
but definitely it was there for quite some time in my life.
Understood. I do want to visit, this question of what has changed, but maybe before that, I do want to understand, like, when did you encounter the story of the Center for Rural Development in IIT, and how old were you at the time?
11th standard, I saw that the then registrar, one Raman, I think he was the one who was spearheading a lot of activity there.
Okay.
And it was only later that Professor Indiresan, when he came over, he took it up in a different scale.
Okay.
But when we were so when I joined BTech, I got admission to civil engineering. Okay, I thought, okay, it's a good thing. That's the only thing to do. So I got, so we had NSS. And as part of NSS, we were taken to this Center for Rural Development, which so just about a few kilometers away from IIT was something called Narayanpuram, which they thought is a village, and that
Mm-hmm.
village we reformed and things like that. So they had a land, and that Sethuraman, that registrar had the idea that of Shamdan, and he thought that NSS workforce has to be taken to really do a lot of digging and then raise the bunds and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the direction in which NSS was being done at that time. That is I'm talking of 1977.
Understood.
Okay. So the story is that the land over there is a marshy land. It used to get inundated, and therefore it has to be raised. And in order to raise it, today you say that you simply bring in tractors and raise the land,
Mm-hmm.
but that should be done through Shramdan, and students should know what is Shramdan, and therefore all that we used to do is to dig and carry the things in the barn. And then there was also a medical center where
Mm-hmm.
some of us used to go and help the doctors and so on. So that used to be the activity of Center for Rural of NSS in IIT at that time.
Okay.
Later, after 2 years, I think Professor Indiresan came, and then he took it to a different scale, and he wanted to make it into an industry which will give employment and so on. And that is around the time, I think, along with Professor Indiresan, Dr. Karunakaran came to IIT Madras.
That's right. I think that was 1981. So it was
Right.
Professor Indiresan here already by 1979. Is that
Yes,
the timeline?
I think so, somewhere around that time.
Understood.
Right.
Understood. And you said in some way that you were also really interested in traditional medical practices. And when did that start? That interest start?
That interest has been going on for quite some time, but I didn't know how to do anything about it. But that's basically I am in a department of applied mechanics, and one third of this entire department is devoted to biomedical engineering. I didn't understand what is biomedical engineering. A lot of colleagues were there, and I kept on probing what they were working on. They are all trying to devise some medical devices that will help some surgeon to take care of some disease, right? at the fag end, and then better device and better surgery, and or as though they will track some cancer cells and then try to kill it using some devices and so on, as though that's the only thing to be done. And definitely Indian practices have a different way of looking at it. And that I knew right from the beginning. Not that I did a lot of research on this, but definitely I knew that we have a tradition more than 5,000 years old, which had a different view even towards health. And all this is very surprisingly ignored in the definition of biomedical engineering as practiced even in our country.
Really?
So, and therefore, I mean, obviously all IITs are geared to catch up with the West. And definitely I was the one who tried to, even though I was trained in the West, I think I took a stand that we should solve relevant problems. Finding what the relevant problems is itself is a big was a task, in the sense that, okay, whatever is fashionable, whatever is funding is where I used to work earlier thing. But in the recent times, at least, I've been trying to give focus to see how we can identify quote unquote relevant problems. And then where down the line, I used to hear about a lot of stories that were going on in, at least at that time, in IIT Delhi, where people used to work on smokeless chulas and make PhD topics out of it and so on. So maybe I thought that somewhere down the line, at least the debate to identify quote unquote relevant problems should continue. Maybe this is one what I started working on in impact of flow in. So I had to do on mechanics, at least start with mechanics, because that is my background. So then from there you go into biomedical engineering, signal processing, and all that is what we started working on in this process of Shirodhara. Where something is going on. So my belief is that people are just aping the West, not doing independent thinking of what we should work on. I still hold to that.
Yeah, it seems like that there's been a theme for many decades now, right? I feel like it was always about following the lead of the West. But I want to hear a little bit more here, Lakshman. Like you said, there is a lot to be learned from the traditional medical practices. What sort of biomedical engineering do you see in the past practices in the country?
Ayurvedic practice. I mean, recently I was asked to make a presentation on what we are working on in to a bunch of retired people, and then I collected some videos. Maybe I will send it to you. That the videos are about some wonders of Ayurvedic treatment. One is about a medicine that is being administered by somebody in Bangalore, and he clearly says that his formulation, which has to be taken with some dedication and with some faith, will cure, and he has proven that it has cured even serious cancer diseases. How does it cure, etc.? They may not be able to explain, but the fact that it has cured is to be taken, which cannot be denied.
Interesting.
So that is from that. I mean, I have 2-3 such videos which I put together. I will share it with you.
I would love to see that.
So what I'm saying is that there are traditional practices which are not yet brought to light, and it's a combination of something that you do with something that is objective, what you call as objective treatment, but also a subjective input into the treatment process. So there are a lot of quite a few such things are there, and some of them are brought into forth. I think Baba Ramdev has been trying hard to bring that up ever since he formed this Patanjali and other things. But I think there's much more that needs to be done. Not enough is being done, and a lot more that needs to be explored by various people. And that's one of the pitch that I want to put in the conference that we are going to have. We have a special track on Ayurvedic treatment also in that conference. So in which where one track is on frugal engineering, another track is on these are mini symposia focusing on special topics. So where we call it as characterization and monitoring techniques in traditional medicine.
Understood.
So I
I
hope a lot of things will come in that.
yeah, remembering this conference or like this large multi-day event, the Traditional Sciences and Technologies, conference that happened in the late 90s, I think.
I know, PPST.
Yeah, and I think you were there with your students, and we're talking about a lot of the mechanical characteristics of bamboo and cane based furniture and how there's a lot of interesting properties there that allow it to have
Right. That's
great
how I
strength.
started my career. That with the Vinu Kale, who was
Hmm.
introduced to me by Dr. Karnakaran. So, I mean, when you join IIT, soon you discover that you can work on anything.
I see.
So, and you will get your salary irrespective of what you work on. All
Hmm.
that can happen in a government institution is that if you're interested in promotions, that can be delayed because you
Hmm.
don't work on what is fashionable. But otherwise, your job is not a threat at all,
Hmm.
and therefore you can explore. But that you can explore, people are not doing it even after they become full professors. That I'm rather surprised.
That's right.
So one of the professors that I knew from ISC, he started
Hmm.
working on some Astra related some drugs and all that. He said that I became a professor and now at least now let me do something useful and relevant.
Hmm.
So that statement, because until then you're chasing papers
Right.
to get your promotions. So at least after that, do something relevant. And he started working on some sisal fibers and the extract from it and some drugs that can come out of it and so on.
Understood. So,
So
Lakshman, maybe for today, I'll ask you one last question, and then we can resume, another time at
okay.
your convenience. I want to ask a little bit more about the story and the traditional medical practices that he's felt cannot be denied. I feel like the common criticism has been that the practice of systematically collecting data and having randomized trials to show that indeed this is not a placebo effect and this is not an imagined effect but a real effect, has not traditionally been done. Or do you feel there was this practice and it's just that I'm not aware of this way of accumulating data?
no, I mean, part of it is true, and that is what is being corrected. At least many of the doctors that I am now interacting with, they are all pursuing research and they have been trained in modern ways of doing research. Suppose they do experiments, they
Mm-hmm.
know that for consistent acceptance, you require at least certain number, and they're following all that. So anything that is reported in open literature is following the traditional the parameters that you are defining.
Mm-hmm.
And more needs to be done, definitely. And that's where I think the Ayurvedic doctors need to pick up some of the statistical methods in reporting
Mm-hmm.
their findings. That may be the one of the things that is maybe lacking. But that is not the reason why they should be. It should not. It should be put down, because many of the things, even in allopathic medicines, are being discovered by experimenting on patients,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no. I mean, I have been having eye disease for quite some time. I mean, I'm suffering, or I have glaucoma, and every time I go to a doctor, an allopathic doctor, I know that he does a lot of tests at my expense, and then gets a data, and at the end of it, he just throws his hands up. So basically, they get a lot of data from us, and really they don't know. I know that they are not treating my disease anymore, and that is where they are stuck, but they cannot admit it, and they will not talk about it openly.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where I think quite a few Ayurvedic treatments do have a role to play.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I will be going very soon to Hyderabad, where he will administer one kashayam.
Mm-hmm.
One kashayam, he will mix it in a curry and give it to us on the last Sunday of every month. And he gets this. He got this formulation from his grandfather somewhere in the
Okay.
book.
Hmm.
He administered it to his father, who almost became blind, and then it was cured.
Well.
And he does a lot of tapas in terms of he does a lot of mantra
Mm-hmm.
before he administered it.
Hmm.
And when we talk to this man, he says that chanting that mantra or doing that thing is an important part of the treatment, because unless you do that, the cure effects will not be felt. Now,
Interesting.
this looks like a mumbo jumbo for a very objective left-winged
It does,
allopathic
yeah.
science. But there is a lot of subtle element there which needs to be articulated properly.
Right.
That is where I think we require much more, much more. I mean, research in the sense that research and articulation in the right language, so that
Right.
people don't dismiss it as a mumbo jumbo.
No,
So when I go to an allopathic doctor, I don't tell them of all the Ayurvedic experiments that I do with my eye, because I don't know whether they will take it properly or they'll try to put it down and so on. So I try to follow all these things parallelly and then see what happens. Allopathic systems are good in monitoring what is happening. I use allopathic systems in monitoring, but for treatment, I go to Ayurveda.
Interesting. I feel like the mind-body connection is still a mystery in allopathy. Like people acknowledge that whether you think a treatment will cure you or you are skeptical about it has a big influence in the outcome. And this is sort of well known, but it's still a mystery as to how this actually happens. So when you say chanting these mantras are a key part, the way I'm trying to rationalize that, it's affecting this mind-body relationship and therefore influencing the efficacy of the treatment that
See, there are energy centers all throughout their body. And there are 70 to 72,000 nadis that are acknowledged to be there in the body. And there are in the yogic practices ways by which you can at least energize these centers of this. And every treatment is based on these principles of energizing the power that is already there within the body. And how to do it in the proper way is part of the treatment. I'm not saying is the entire treatment, but these things are taken to be part of the treatment. So along with that, some mysterious medical formulation with an invocation, it plays the role. The invocation is equally important. When the invocation, for example, when I look at that the video that of cancer cure, he says the priest pray to the goddess and she will cure you. And that's he puts that as a part of his treatment process. For a person who doesn't believe in God, we can only say, okay, please suffer. But I mean, you have to define the God properly and then really have faith in it. And that entire so-called faith in God is the way by which you activate your own energy centers that are there within you. So that has to be equally emphasized. So a lot of mysterious elements are there which need to be articulated properly.
Lakshman, this has been great. I learned, even despite having known you for a few decades, a lot of new things about you. So thank you for sharing the stories from your youth. Maybe we'll pause today for now, and we'll resume again at a later time.
Okay.